The little alpha boy couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He stood in the middle of Central Park's crowded pathway with tears running down his face, his small hands clenched near his chest, while hundreds of people walked past him like he was invisible. His clothes were expensive, the kind of tiny tailored outfit only very rich families bought for children, but that did not make him any less lost. If anything, it made people avoid him more. New York was good at that. See something strange, pretend you didn't. Hear someone crying, keep walking. But Cal had never been good at ignoring people who looked broken. He had just finished a long shift and was cutting through the park on his way home when he saw the boy. At first, he thought a parent would appear within seconds. A nanny, a guard, someone. But nobody came. The boy only cried harder, turning in place like every direction frightened him. Cal slowed down, then stopped. He knew this was probably none of his business. A lone Omega approaching a lost child in the middle of the city was not exactly safe or smart. But the boy looked so small, and everyone else was treating his terror like background noise. So Cal crouched a few feet away, keeping his hands visible and his voice gentle. "Hey, sweetheart. Are you lost?" The boy looked at him with wide, terrified eyes and answered in a rush of words Cal did not understand at first. Not English. His voice shook so badly that each sentence broke apart between sobs. Cal tried simple English again, then a little Spanish because he knew enough from work to manage basic phrases. The boy only cried harder. Then Cal heard it. Papa. The word was small, trembling, desperate. Italian. Cal's breath caught. He had studied Italian for years, first because he loved the language, then because it became one of the few things in his life that still felt like his own. He had not expected that random skill to matter here, in the middle of Central Park, with a lost child shaking in front of him. He softened his voice even more. Non pianger, piccolo, Cal said gently. Sono qui per aiutarti. Come ti chiami? Don't cry, little one. I'm here to help. What's your name? The change was immediate. The boy froze. His tear-filled eyes lifted to Cal's face, and for the first time, recognition broke through the panic. Elio, he whispered. Then the words came tumbling out faster. Mi chiamo Elio. Ho perso il mio papà. C'era un cane, io volevo vederlo, poi non c'era più nessuno. Cal understood enough. His name was Elio. He had seen a dog, followed it, and lost his father. Cal nodded slowly, careful not to overwhelm him. Va bene, Elio. Respira. Troveremo tuo papà. It's okay. Breathe. We'll find your father. Elio's lower lip trembled, but he obeyed. He took one shaky breath, then another. When Cal offered his hand, the boy grabbed it with both of his, clinging so tightly it made Cal's chest ache. And then something unexpected happened. Elio leaned closer. Not in a normal childlike way. It was instinctive. An alpha child seeking comfort from an omega scent. Cal had always kept his pheromones controlled in public, careful and quiet, but fear made children sensitive. Elio pressed closer to his side as if Cal's presence was the only safe thing in the entire park. Cal swallowed. It's okay, he murmured in Italian. I've got you. Elio's crying slowed. He still looked scared, but he was no longer spiraling. Cal glanced around, trying to decide what to do next. Park security. Police. Maybe a lost child station nearby. Then he saw them. 3 men in dark suits moved through the crowd with sharp, practiced focus. They were not random bystanders. They searched like trained security, eyes scanning faces, hands close to earpieces, bodies tense with controlled urgency. Cal's stomach tightened. Elio, he asked quietly in Italian. Do you know those men? The boy turned and his whole face changed. Marco. Elio cried, waving one small hand while still holding Cal with the other. Marco. One of the men spotted them. Relief flashed across his face so strongly that Cal almost relaxed. Almost. The man spoke quickly into his earpiece, and within seconds all 3 were moving toward them. They surrounded Cal and Elio without touching him, but their presence was heavy enough to make Cal's instincts sharpen. He pulled Elio slightly behind him before he could stop himself. The first man, Marco, crouched in front of Elio and spoke in rapid Italian, checking his face, his arms, his hands. Elio answered between sniffles, still clinging to Cal's sleeve. Then Marco looked at Cal. You found him, he said in accented English. Thank you. He was scared, Cal replied carefully. I just stayed with him. Before Marco could answer, the crowd shifted. Not because anyone was asked to move. They simply did. A man walked toward them through the park, and every person seemed to understand without being told that they should get out of his way. Cal felt him before he fully saw him. An alpha. Not just any alpha. The kind of alpha whose presence made the air feel tighter. Controlled. Dangerous. His suit was dark, expensive, and perfectly fitted. His expression was cold enough to silence strangers, but his eyes were fixed on Elio with a fear he could not hide. Elio. The boy released Cal instantly and ran. Papa. The man caught him in both arms, lifting him off the ground with a tenderness that did not match the danger surrounding him. His face changed completely as he held his son close. The cold vanished. The power remained, but it softened around the child. Mi hai spaventato a mort, he murmured, pressing his cheek to Elio's hair. Non scappare mai più, capito? You scared me to death. Never run off again, understand? Elio nodded into his father's shoulder and began explaining everything in broken, emotional Italian. The dog. The crowd. The fear. Cal. The man listened, one hand spread protectively across Elio's back. Then his eyes lifted. They landed on Cal. It felt like being seen too closely. Marco stepped slightly aside. Mr. Alexis, this is the Omega who found him. Alexis. The name fit him. Elegant. Sharp. Dangerous. Cal suddenly became very aware of where he stood, of the security around them, of the expensive suit, the quiet authority, the way even the crowd seemed afraid to look too long. Alexis shifted Elio to one arm and stepped closer. You speak Italian, he said. Cal nodded. I studied it. Where? Mostly here. Some classes. A lot of practice. He hesitated, then added, I just knew enough to calm him down. Elio immediately shook his head against Alexis's shoulder. No, papa. He sang. Alexis went still. Cal blinked. He had almost forgotten. While Elio had been crying, Cal had hummed a few lines of an old Italian lullaby his teacher used to sing during lessons, something simple and soft. It had been instinct. Nothing more. But Alexis's expression changed so sharply that Cal felt the shift in his own chest. What song? Alexis asked quietly. Elio sang one trembling line. The silence that followed was heavy. Alexis looked at his son first, then back at Cal, and something unreadable moved across his face. Not anger. Not suspicion. Something closer to pain. My late Omega used to sing that to him, Alexis said, his voice lower now. Every night. Cal's throat tightened. I didn't know. I know. Elio reached out suddenly toward Cal. He helped me, Papa. Alexis glanced at his son's small hand, still reaching. Then at Cal. For the first time, the dangerous alpha looked almost shaken. Elio does not trust strangers, he said slowly. He does not let them touch him. He has not smiled like that since his Omega parent died. Cal did not know what to say. Alexis stepped closer, his gaze steady and far too intense. What is your name? Cal. Cal, Alexis repeated like he intended to remember it. Then Elio leaned against his father's chest and whispered, still watching Cal. Can he come with us? Cal's heart skipped. Alexis did not answer his son right away. He only looked at Cal as if one ordinary act of kindness had just placed him in the center of something much larger than he understood. And when Alexis finally spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, and impossible to ignore. I think, he said, we need to talk again, Mr. Cal. Cal spent the entire subway ride home replaying the encounter in Central Park over and over again, because no matter how hard he tried to think rationally, his instincts kept warning him that the man named Alexis was not someone a normal Omega accidentally crossed paths with, and then simply forgot about. The expensive suit, the bodyguards, the way the entire crowd unconsciously moved aside for him, none of it felt ordinary. And yet the thing that stayed with Cal most was not the danger surrounding Alexis, but the expression on the alpha's face when Elio had started smiling again. That look had not belonged to a Mafia king or a powerful businessman. It had belonged to a terrified parent who thought he was losing his child for the second time. By the time Cal reached his apartment in Queens, it was already dark outside, and the exhaustion from his shift finally began settling into his bones. He lived alone in a tiny apartment above a laundromat, the kind of place where the pipes rattled at night and the walls were thin enough to hear arguments from neighboring units. But it was affordable, safe enough, and close to work. Normally, he liked the quiet after long shifts, but tonight the silence felt strange. Heavy. Like something was waiting. Cal dropped his bag onto the couch and moved toward the kitchen, only to freeze halfway there when headlights slid across his window. A black SUV sat parked across the street. His stomach tightened immediately. Expensive. Tinted windows. Engine still running. No way, he muttered under his breath, stepping back from the curtain. He told himself it was coincidence. New York was full of rich people and expensive cars. Except 20 minutes later, when he glanced outside again, the SUV was still there. Cal grabbed his phone and opened a search engine before he could talk himself out of it. Alexis. At first, the results looked harmless enough. Luxury hotels. Investment companies. Charity galas. Cultural foundations supporting Italian communities around New York. But the deeper Cal searched, the stranger the articles became. Certain names repeated constantly beside Alexis's. Alleged organized crime ties. Underground influence. Territorial control. Illegal gambling investigations that somehow never led anywhere. Rumors of one of the most powerful mafia families in the city. Cal slowly lowered the phone. Oh my God! His pulse sped up immediately as memories from the park replayed inside his head differently now. The bodyguards. The controlled violence in the air. The dangerous calm in Alexis's voice. He had spent half an hour comforting the son of a mafia boss. His phone buzzed suddenly in his hand, making him nearly jump. Unknown number. Cal hesitated before opening it. Don't be afraid. The protection is for your safety. His throat went dry instantly. Another message appeared seconds later. Elio asked for you 3 times before sleeping. I would like to speak with you again. Cal stared at the screen in disbelief. How did Alexis even get his number? Almost like the alpha could sense the question, another text arrived. Marco asked the cafe owner where you worked. No harm was intended. Cal rubbed a hand over his face. That somehow did not make him feel better. Then another message appeared. I owe you more gratitude than I was able to express properly today. Cal should have ignored it. Any reasonable person would have blocked the number immediately and pretended none of this had happened. But despite every warning in his head, he remembered Elio clutching his sleeve with shaking little hands, remembered how desperately the child had leaned into his scent for comfort. Before he realized it, Cal was typing back. Elio seemed sweet. I'm glad he's okay. The response came almost immediately. He hasn't spoken that much to anyone outside family in over 2 years. Cal frowned. 2 years. The same amount of time since Elio's Omega parent died. The thought made his chest ache unexpectedly. A final message arrived. Would you consider having dinner with us tomorrow evening? Elio asked if the kind Omega from the park would come back. Cal stared at the text for a very long time. This was insane. Absolutely insane. He barely knew anything about Alexis besides rumors and frightening articles online, and every instinct in Omega had about survival should have been screaming at him to stay away from dangerous alphas with power and influence. But beneath all of that fear was another feeling he could not ignore. Elio had looked lonely. Very lonely. Cal typed slowly. Just dinner. The typing bubble appeared immediately. Just dinner. For some reason, that answer made Cal's heart beat even harder. The next evening, a black car waited outside his building exactly on time. Marco stood beside it in a dark suit, calm and professional, as if escorting nervous Omegas around New York was part of his daily routine. Mr. Cal, he greeted politely. Thank you for coming. You people are really intense, Cal muttered before he could stop himself. To his surprise, Marco laughed quietly. That is a polite way to describe this family. The drive into Manhattan was silent except for soft Italian music playing through the speakers. Cal spent most of it staring out the window trying to calm himself. But the deeper they moved into the Upper East Side, the more obvious the wealth became. Expensive buildings. Private security. Quiet streets where even the city noise sounded refined. When the car finally stopped in front of a massive townhouse, Cal almost forgot how to breathe. It was beautiful in an understated way, elegant instead of flashy, but the security around it made one thing clear immediately. Nobody entered this house without permission. Marco led him inside, and warmth hit Cal first. Not emotional warmth. Actual warmth. The townhouse smelled faintly like expensive wood, tea, and something comforting beneath it all, though the place itself still felt strangely empty, like people lived there without truly living in it. Then a blur raced down the hallway. Cal! Elio crashed directly into him before any adult could stop him, wrapping both arms around Cal's waist while his scent immediately brightened with excitement. Cal blinked in surprise before laughing softly and crouching down. Ciao, piccolo. You came back. Elio whispered like he had not fully believed it would happen. Something tight twisted painfully inside Cal's chest. I said I would. From somewhere deeper in the house, footsteps approached. Alexis appeared a moment later wearing a dark button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled slightly past his wrists, looking somehow even more dangerous dressed casually than he had in a suit. His eyes landed first on Elio clinging to Cal, then slowly lifted toward Cal himself. For one brief second, the alpha looked relieved. You came, Alexis said quietly. Cal nodded once. I didn't want Elio thinking I lied. That matters to him more than you know. Before Cal could answer, another alpha entered the room from the dining area, older than Alexis and dressed just as expensively, though the look he gave Cal carried obvious judgment. This is the Omega? The man asked bluntly. Cal stiffened immediately. The alpha's eyes swept over him casually, dismissively. You brought a stranger into the house because the child smiled once? The atmosphere changed instantly. Alexis did not raise his voice, did not move aggressively. Somehow that made the shift even scarier. You will address him properly, Alexis said coldly. Mister. Cal is under my protection. The entire room fell silent. The older alpha looked stunned for exactly half a second before nodding once and stepping back. My mistake. Cal stared at Alexis in shock. The alpha did not even look at the other man again. His attention returned fully to Cal and Elio, like nobody else in the room mattered. Dinner is ready, Alexis said calmly, though the edge in his pheromones had not fully disappeared yet. And Elio refused to eat until you arrived. Elio tightened his grip around Cal proudly. Because food tastes better when he's here. For the first time that evening, Alexis smiled. It was small, brief, but devastatingly warm. And somehow, standing in the middle of a mafia boss's townhouse with a child attached to his side and dangerous alpha eyes fixed on him far too intensely, Cal realized something that frightened him more than the rumors ever could. Part of him was already starting to feel comfortable here. The dinner that was supposed to happen once somehow became part of Cal's weekly routine without either him or Alexis ever officially discussing it. One evening turned into 3 visits a week, then 4, until Marco simply started arriving outside Cal's apartment at the same time every afternoon, as if the entire Russo household had silently decided Cal already belonged there. At first, Cal kept trying to maintain emotional distance because getting attached to a mafia family, especially one led by a dangerously attractive alpha who looked at him too intensely, sounded like the beginning of every terrible decision an Omega could make. But Elio made distance impossible. The child waited for him every day near the front window, practically vibrating with excitement whenever Cal arrived, and the townhouse itself slowly began changing in subtle ways that even Cal could notice. The silence inside the house no longer felt cold all the time. Some nights music played softly from the kitchen while dinner was prepared. Elio laughed more now, real laughter that echoed through the hallways instead of nervous little smiles. The garden in the back courtyard, which had apparently been abandoned for years, slowly came back to life after Cal casually mentioned one afternoon that the flowers looked dead from lack of care. The next day Alexis had gardeners arrive before sunrise, and by the end of the week Elio was proudly helping Cal plant herbs and small white flowers near the fountain. You changed this place, Teresa told him one evening while preparing tea in the kitchen. She had worked for the family since before Elio was born and treated Cal with the quiet affection of someone who had already accepted him long ago. The house used to feel like everyone was holding their breath all the time. Cal glanced toward the study where Alexis was working while Elio colored beside him on the carpet. I didn't do anything. You did, Teresa said softly. You stayed. That answer unsettled Cal more than he wanted to admit. Because the truth was he liked being there too much. He liked hearing Elio run through the halls looking for him. He liked sitting in the kitchen late at night drinking tea while Alexis loosened his tie after long meetings. He liked the strange domestic comfort of the townhouse, even though every hallway still held armed security, and every phone call Alexis took carried hints of dangerous things happening beneath the polished surface of his world. Most of all, Cal liked seeing the side of Alexis nobody else seemed allowed to witness. The terrifying mafia alpha the city whispered about disappeared completely around Elio. Alexis cooked breakfast for his son whenever he could. He remembered exactly how Elio liked his pasta cut. He listened patiently to endless stories about cartoons and dragons and toy soldiers, as if every word mattered. And when Alexis thought nobody was paying attention, Cal often caught him simply watching the two of them together with an expression so soft it almost hurt to look at. That was the dangerous part. Not the bodyguards. Not the rumors. The dangerous part was forgetting Alexis Russo could ruin people. One rainy evening after dinner, Elio fell asleep curled against Cal on the living room sofa while an animated movie played quietly in the background. Cal carefully brushed hair away from the child's forehead, smiling faintly when Elio instinctively nuzzled closer into his scent. "He sleeps easier near you," Alexis said from the doorway. Cal looked up slowly. Alexis had removed his suit jacket hours ago, the sleeves of his dark shirt rolled to his elbows, exposing strong forearms marked faintly with old scars. Somehow the more relaxed he looked, the more intimidating he became. "It's probably an Omega comfort thing," Cal answered quietly. "Kids react strongly to pheromones." "It's more than that." Alexis stepped closer, his voice lower now. "He trusts you." Cal swallowed slightly. "I think he was lonely." The answer made something flicker across Alexis's face before he looked away toward the rain outside the windows. After his Omega parent died, he stopped speaking to almost everyone except me and Teresa. Therapists came and went. Tutors. Specialists. None of them lasted more than a few weeks. His eyes returned to Cal slowly. "Then you appeared in Central Park, and somehow my son started smiling again." The room suddenly felt too warm. Cal looked down at Elio partly to avoid Alexis's gaze. "Children just need patience." "No," Alexis murmured. "They need people who make them feel safe." For several long seconds neither of them spoke. Then Alexis moved closer to the sofa and crouched beside Elio carefully, adjusting the blanket around his son before his fingers brushed lightly against Cal's wrist. It was barely a touch, almost accidental, but Cal's entire body reacted instantly. Heat rushed beneath his skin while the alpha's scent deepened subtly around him, warm and dark and dangerously addictive. Alexis noticed. Cal knew he noticed because the alpha immediately pulled his hand back slightly, restraint tightening every line of his body. "Sorry," Alexis said quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong." That only seemed to make the tension worse. Over the next few weeks the space between them became filled with moments that felt far too intimate for two people who technically were not anything to each other. Alexis adjusted Cal's scarf before they walked outside with Elio one cold afternoon, his fingers lingering near Cal's throat just long enough to make the Omega stop breathing for a second. Another night Cal accidentally fell asleep in the upstairs library after reading with Elio, only to wake hours later beneath a blanket in one of the guest rooms with the faint lingering scent of Alexis still surrounding him. Sometimes Cal caught the alpha staring at him during dinner with an expression so intense it made his pulse stumble. And somehow, despite all of that tension, Alexis never crossed a line. That restraint affected Cal more than possessiveness ever could. One evening Alexis returned home much later than usual, exhaustion visible beneath the controlled calm he always wore in public. Elio had already fallen asleep upstairs, and Cal was sitting alone in the kitchen sketching absent-mindedly in a notebook Teresa had bought him. Alexis paused when he saw him. "You're still awake." Cal shrugged lightly. "Couldn't sleep." Alexis walked closer slowly, loosening the tie around his neck. "What are you drawing?" "Nothing good." "Can I see?" Cal hesitated before sliding the notebook across the table. It was a sketch of the townhouse garden. Alexis stared at it quietly for several seconds before speaking again. "You stopped drawing professionally?" "I stopped having time." Cal tried to sound casual, but Alexis was too observant for that. "Art doesn't pay rent." Without another word, Alexis gestured for Cal to follow him. Curiosity outweighed caution. He led Cal upstairs through a quiet hallway before stopping in front of a locked door Cal had never seen opened before. Alexis stood there silently for a moment before finally unlocking it. The room inside was beautiful. Large windows, soft lighting, shelves lined with untouched art supplies, canvases covered carefully with white cloth. "It belonged to my Omega," Alexis said quietly. This was his studio. Cal immediately looked toward him. "Alexis, I haven't opened this room in years." His voice remained calm, but grief sat underneath every word. "I thought if I left it untouched long enough, maybe the memories would stop hurting." The silence between them felt fragile. Then Alexis looked directly at Cal. "But when I saw your sketch tonight, the first thing I thought was that this room should belong to someone creating things again." Cal's chest tightened painfully. "You barely know me." "I know enough." Alexis stepped closer slowly until barely any space remained between them. Cal could feel the warmth of his body now, the steady pressure of alpha pheromones wrapping around the room without aggression, only longing. You make this house feel alive again, Alexis said softly. Elio laughs because of you. Teresa smiles more because of you. His eyes lowered briefly toward Cal's lips before lifting again. I look forward to every day you walk through that front door. Cal's pulse hammered violently. The alpha moved even closer, stopping beside Cal's neck as if fighting himself. Then Alexis whispered against his skin, voice rough with restraint. You smell like home. Cal turned instinctively. For one dangerous second they almost kissed. But Alexis stepped back first. His jaw tightened hard as if the decision physically hurt him. Good night, Cal. And before Cal could gather enough breath to answer, Alexis walked out of the studio, leaving the Omega alone in the middle of a room filled with ghosts and the terrifying realization that the most dangerous alpha in New York was trying desperately not to fall in love with him. Cal should have known peace inside the Russo townhouse would never last forever, because the closer he became to Alexis and Elio, the more obvious it became that he was no longer just an outsider helping a grieving child. People inside the Mafia world had started noticing him. At first it showed in subtle ways, lingering stares during dinners, whispered conversations that stopped whenever he entered a room, security details doubling whenever Alexis took him and Elio outside together. But eventually even Cal could feel the shift in the atmosphere around the family. Alexis became more alert. Marco stayed closer than usual. Several nights in a row, Cal heard low, tense voices echoing from Alexis's office long after midnight, followed by the smell of stressed alpha pheromones lingering throughout the hallway the next morning. And then came the invitation. It's only a dinner, Alexis said one evening while adjusting the cufflinks on his black dress shirt, though the tension in his scent told Cal it was far more than that. Several families gathering for business and appearances. I normally would not ask you to attend something like this. But you need me there anyway, Cal answered quietly. Alexis's eyes lifted toward him slowly. I need people to understand something. The answer unsettled Cal more than he expected. He stood silently while Alexis approached him across the bedroom, stopping close enough to adjust the collar of Cal's dark formal outfit with careful fingers. The touch itself was innocent, but the intimacy of it made Cal's pulse quicken immediately. Alexis noticed every reaction now, every shift in breathing, every flicker of scent. You can still say no, Alexis murmured. Cal swallowed. Would it make problems for you if I did? Alexis did not answer right away, which was answer enough. The gathering took place inside a massive luxury hotel owned by the Russo family, and the moment Cal stepped into the private ballroom beside Alexis, he finally understood what true alpha dominance looked like. Powerful scents filled the room beneath the expensive perfume and alcohol, layered tension hiding beneath polished smiles and tailored suits. Every alpha present carried the same dangerous energy Alexis did, but none of them felt as controlled. Men watched the room like predators measuring weaknesses. Conversations stopped subtly when Alexis entered. And when Cal walked beside him, several eyes immediately shifted toward the Omega at his side. Elio had stayed home with Teresa, thankfully spared from the suffocating atmosphere of the event. You okay? Alexis asked quietly without looking at him. Cal nodded once. I just suddenly understand why your security team always looks ready to kill people. That earned the smallest hint of a smile from Alexis before it disappeared again. For the first hour, everything remained manageable. Alexis kept Cal close beside him during conversations, one hand occasionally brushing lightly against the small of Cal's back whenever crowds became too dense. Nobody openly disrespected him, but Cal could still feel the judgment in the room. Omega companions were common around powerful alphas. Omega partners treated with actual respect were not. Then the problem started. Alexis had stepped away briefly to handle a call with Marco near the balcony when another alpha approached Cal near the bar. Older. Wealthy. The kind of man whose smile immediately made Cal uncomfortable. So, the alpha drawled casually while looking him over far too openly, you're the Omega everyone's whispering about. Cal forced politeness into his tone. I think you have me confused with someone more interesting. The alpha laughed softly and stepped closer than necessary. No, I don't think so. Alexis Russo doesn't bring Omegas into family events unless they matter. Cal immediately took half a step back, but the alpha only moved closer again. What exactly are you to him? The man asked quietly. A temporary distraction? A replacement? The mention of Alexis's late Omega hit harder than Cal expected. I think that's none of your business. Maybe. The alpha's smile sharpened slightly. But I'm curious what makes someone like Alexis finally lose control. Then Cal felt it. Pheromones. Heavy alpha pheromones pressed deliberately into the air around him, not enough to fully trigger panic, but enough to make every omega instinct inside Cal tense painfully. The pressure crawled beneath his skin immediately. Dominance. Testing. Humiliation. Cal's breathing hitched. The alpha noticed and leaned closer. There it is, he murmured. I was wondering how long you'd keep pretending not to react. Before Cal could respond, the temperature in the entire room seemed to drop. A dangerous silence spread outward so suddenly that several nearby conversations stopped mid-sentence. The pressure crushing Cal vanished instantly beneath something far more terrifying. Alexis. Cal turned. The alpha stood several feet away with Marco behind him, but the expression on Alexis's face made every instinct inside Cal freeze. Calm. Cold. Furious beyond words. And his pheromones were everywhere. Not wild. Controlled. Which somehow felt far more dangerous. The alpha near Cal straightened slightly. Alexis. Move away from him. The voice was quiet. Nobody in the room missed the threat inside it. The other alpha tried to laugh lightly. Relax. We were just talking. You were forcing pheromones onto my omega. The ballroom fell completely silent. Cal's heart slammed painfully against his ribs. My omega. The words echoed through the room like a declaration. The other alpha's expression hardened slightly. Careful, Russo. You're making this emotional. Alexis walked forward slowly, each step measured lethal. Touch him again, he said softly, and I'll bury your entire bloodline so deep this city forgets your family ever existed. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the other alphas lowered their eyes slightly beneath the crushing weight of Alexis's dominance. Then Alexis stopped beside Cal and pulled him gently, but firmly behind his body in one smooth motion, shielding him completely from the room without ever looking away from the man in front of him. Do you understand me now? Alexis asked quietly. The alpha swallowed once before nodding. Understood. Only then did Alexis's pheromones ease slightly. Marco immediately stepped forward to escort the other man away while conversations cautiously resumed around the ballroom, though everyone kept glancing nervously toward Alexis and Cal. Cal's hands were shaking. Not from fear of Alexis. From realizing someone had finally chosen him publicly instead of hiding him. Alexis turned toward him immediately, his expression changing the second he saw Cal trembling. Did he hurt you? Cal shook his head quickly. No. But Alexis still cupped the back of his neck gently, checking him instinctively like he needed physical confirmation Cal was unharmed. We're leaving. The drive home was silent except for the sound of rain against the car windows. Alexis sat beside Cal in the back seat with terrifying stillness, though tension rolled off him heavily enough to fill the entire vehicle. Finally Cal spoke quietly. You called me your omega. Alexis closed his eyes briefly. I know. You sounded serious. I was. The answer made Cal's breath catch. By the time they reached the townhouse, the storm outside had worsened. Alexis followed Cal upstairs in silence until they reached the studio, the room glowing softly beneath warm lights and unfinished paintings. The moment the door closed behind them, Alexis finally exhaled sharply like he had been holding himself together for hours. He should never have touched you, Alexis muttered, pacing once through the room. I should have seen him approaching sooner. Alexis. The alpha stopped immediately. Cal stepped closer slowly. You were scared. Something fragile cracked across Alexis's expression. Terrified, he admitted quietly. That honesty shattered the last wall between them. Cal reached up carefully, touching Alexis's face for the first time. The alpha leaned into the contact instantly. And then Alexis kissed him. Slowly. Carefully. Like he had wanted to for far too long and still could not fully believe he was allowed to. The kiss deepened gradually, filled with restraint and unbearable longing instead of aggression. Alexis's hands settled carefully at Cal's waist while his pheromones wrapped warmly around the omega without pressure, only protection. Cal melted into him completely. For one dangerous moment Alexis's control slipped. His hand moved toward Cal's throat instinctively, toward the scent gland every alpha eventually wanted to mark. Then Alexis stopped himself immediately. Breathing hard, he rested his forehead against Cal's and whispered shakily, Can I? Cal looked into his eyes and saw something that stunned him completely. Not hunger. Not dominance. Fear. Fear that Cal would say no. Slowly, gently, Cal shook his head. Alexis stepped back instantly despite the obvious pain it caused him. That restraint somehow affected Cal more than anything else tonight. And when Alexis finally walked him toward the guest room hours later, the alpha paused at the doorway like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he only asked softly, "Will you stay tonight?" This time, Cal did not hesitate. Yes. After the night of the Mafia gathering, something inside the Russo household shifted permanently. Because Alexis stopped pretending Cal was only Elio's tutor, and Cal stopped pretending his feelings for the alpha could still be ignored. Nobody officially labeled the relationship yet, but labels became unnecessary when Alexis began reaching for Cal instinctively in front of other people. When Marco started organizing security schedules around Cal's movements without needing permission, and when Elio proudly announced to Teresa one morning that Papa smiles differently now because Omega Cal stays here. The child's happiness made denial impossible. Even the townhouse itself seemed warmer these days, filled with sounds that had apparently disappeared years ago. Laughter during breakfast. Music drifting from the studio late at night while Cal painted. Alexis returning home earlier whenever possible just to sit beside them during dinner like he was afraid to miss even ordinary moments. And somehow, despite the danger constantly surrounding the Russo family, those weeks became the happiest Cal had experienced in years. That frightened him more than anything else. Because happiness felt temporary in Alexis's world. One evening, Cal stood in the kitchen helping Elio bake cookies while Alexis handled business calls in his office upstairs. Flour covered half the counter, Elio's cheeks, and somehow even Cal's sleeves after the child enthusiastically threw ingredients around with no regard for cleanup. "You're making a disaster," Cal laughed while trying to rescue the mixing bowl. "No, we're cooking." "That is not the same thing." Elio grinned proudly before suddenly lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Papa likes when you stay overnight." Cal nearly dropped the spoon. "Elio. He sleeps more now." The child continued stirring seriously. "Before, Marco always said Papa worked all night because he never rested." The innocent honesty in the statement hit Cal harder than expected. That night after Elio fell asleep, Cal found Alexis alone in the library reviewing documents with tired eyes and loosened sleeves. The alpha looked up immediately when Cal entered, his entire expression softening in a way that still made Cal's chest ache every single time. "You should be asleep," Alexis murmured. "So should you." Alexis smiled faintly before holding out one hand. Cal walked toward him without hesitation now, fitting naturally against the alpha's side, while Alexis rested his forehead briefly against Cal's shoulder like he needed the contact more than words. "You smell like paint again," Alexis murmured quietly. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "I say it like I'm becoming addicted to it." Cal's pulse stumbled softly. Moments like this had become dangerous because they no longer felt rare. Alexis kissed him slowly beneath the dim library lights, gentle enough to make Cal melt immediately, and for several peaceful seconds the outside world disappeared completely. Then Alexis's phone rang. The alpha froze instantly. Cal felt the change before Alexis even answered. The scent in the room sharpened. Tension flooded through his body. By the time Alexis picked up the call, his expression had already darkened. "What happened?" Silence. Then Alexis stood up so abruptly the chair behind him nearly tipped over. "Where?" Cal's stomach tightened immediately. Alexis listened for several more seconds before ending the call without another word. His jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. "Alexis." The alpha turned toward him immediately. "You're not leaving the house tomorrow." "What?" "There was movement tonight near the gallery district. Someone's been tracking your schedule." Cold fear crawled slowly down Cal's spine. "Tracking me?" Alexis moved closer instantly, hands gripping Cal's shoulders carefully but firmly. "Listen to me very carefully. Until I know exactly who's behind this, you do not go anywhere alone. Marco stays with you at all times." "Alexis, I'm not helpless." "I know that." His voice dropped lower. "That's not what scares me." The conversation ended there, but tension settled heavily over the entire house afterward. Security doubled overnight. Marco barely left Cal's side. Even Elio noticed the atmosphere changing, though Alexis tried desperately to hide it from him. 3 days later, everything finally exploded. Cal had insisted on taking Elio to a small bookstore near the townhouse because the child had been trapped indoors too long already. Marco and 2 guards accompanied them, which should have been enough. It wasn't. 1 second Cal was helping Elio choose between picture books near the children's section. The next second, every instinct inside him screamed danger. A stranger grabbed him from behind. "Move and the kid gets hurt." Elio screamed immediately. The bookstore erupted into chaos. Cal reacted on instinct, twisting sharply enough to slam his elbow backward into the attacker's ribs, but another man appeared beside them almost instantly. Marco shouted somewhere nearby. Customers ran. Elio cried hysterically. Then pheromones hit the air. Violent alpha pheromones. Aggressive. Suffocating. Cal's vision blurred briefly as someone dragged him backward toward the emergency exit. "Alexis Russo is going to burn this city down for this," one man muttered harshly. The statement terrified Cal because he knew it was true. Everything happened too fast after that. Gunshots outside. Marco roaring orders. The grip on Cal suddenly disappearing as bodies crashed violently into shelves nearby. Then a terrifying scent flooded the bookstore. Alexis. Not calm. Not controlled. Furious. Cal looked up just in time to see Alexis slam one attacker into a wall hard enough to crack wood beneath him. The alpha moved with terrifying precision, every motion fueled by pure protective rage instead of hesitation. Security guards surrounded the area instantly, but Alexis barely seemed aware of anyone except Cal. Cal! The way Alexis said his name made Cal's chest tighten painfully. The alpha crossed the room in seconds and grabbed Cal carefully, hands moving over his arms, shoulders, face, checking for injuries almost frantically. "Did they hurt you?" Cal shook his head quickly even though his hands would not stop trembling. Behind them Elio cried loudly, terrified beyond words. The sound shattered Alexis completely. Cal saw it happen in real time. The alpha looked toward his son and suddenly seemed exhausted instead of furious, like the possibility of losing both of them at once had broken something inside him. That night the townhouse felt unbearably quiet. Elio eventually fell asleep curled tightly against Teresa after crying himself sick from fear. Marco handled the aftermath downstairs with the rest of security, while Alexis disappeared for several hours without explanation. Cal knew exactly where he went. When Alexis finally returned after midnight, his white dress shirt was stained with blood. Not his own. The sight stopped Cal cold. Alexis froze in the doorway when he realized Cal was still awake in the studio. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Then Alexis looked away first. "You should sleep." Cal stared at the blood on his hands. "What did you do?" Silence. That silence answered enough. Cal suddenly understood the reality of Alexis's world in a way he never fully had before. Not the elegant businessman. Not the protective alpha. The Mafia king. The man capable of terrifying violence when someone touched the people he loved. Fear twisted sharply inside his chest for the first time. Alexis noticed immediately. The realization devastated him. Something dark and hollow crossed the alpha's face before he stepped backward slightly, like he physically could not bear forcing Cal near him right now. "I told you this world destroys everything beautiful," Alexis said quietly. "I told you eventually you would see what I really am." Cal opened his mouth, but nothing came out. That hesitation broke Alexis completely. The alpha laughed once bitterly before rubbing blood-stained hands over his face. "Every person I love ends up suffering because of me. My Omega died. My son stopped smiling for years. And now you almost got dragged into this because I was selfish enough to want something good again." Cal's chest hurt painfully. "I need a few days," he admitted softly. Alexis went still. The hurt in his eyes looked almost unbearable. But instead of stopping him, Alexis only nodded once. "Of course." That answer somehow hurt even worse. Cal left the townhouse the next morning. And for the first time since entering Alexis Russo's life, the house felt cold again. The first night away from the Russo townhouse felt wrong in ways Cal could not explain properly. Because even though his apartment in Queens had once been the safest and most familiar place in his life, now it only felt small, empty, and painfully quiet. He could still smell Alexis on the sweater folded across the chair near the window. He could still hear Elio crying in the bookstore every time he closed his eyes. Worst of all, he could still remember the look on Alexis's face when Cal admitted he needed space, because beneath all the power, anger, and violence, the alpha had looked terrified of losing him. Cal barely slept. By the second day, the silence became unbearable. No tiny footsteps running through hallways. No Elio knocking on his door asking for bedtime stories in Italian. No Alexis appearing silently behind him while he painted late at night, just to rest one hand against his waist for a few quiet seconds. Home. That word kept returning no matter how hard Cal tried pushing it away. On the third evening, there was a knock at his apartment door. Cal opened it to find Marco standing there alone. The bodyguard looked exhausted. Elio stopped eating properly, Marco said without greeting. And the boss hasn't slept since you left. Cal looked away immediately. Marco. He thinks you're afraid of him now. The pain in Marco's voice surprised him. Cal leaned heavily against the doorway. I'm not afraid of him. Then come back and tell him that yourself. The drive to Manhattan happened in silence, but the closer they got to the townhouse, the tighter Cal's chest became. He had spent 3 days trying to convince himself distance was the smart choice, that loving someone like Alexis would only end in heartbreak and blood eventually. But none of those thoughts changed the fact that he missed them constantly. The townhouse lights were still on when they arrived. Marco opened the front door quietly, and the moment Cal stepped inside, small footsteps thundered across the floor. Elio. The child crashed into him hard enough to nearly knock him backward. You came back, Elio whispered shakily while clinging to him. Papa said maybe you needed time, but I thought maybe you hated us. Cal's heart broke instantly. No, Piccolo, he murmured while kneeling down to hug him tightly. I could never hate you. Elio's eyes were red from crying. Promise. I promise. A quiet sound behind them made Cal look up. Alexis stood at the end of the hallway completely motionless. For several long seconds nobody spoke. The alpha looked exhausted. His shirt sleeves were rolled unevenly like he had not cared enough to fix them properly, dark circles visible beneath his eyes for the first time since Cal met him. And despite everything, despite the danger and fear and blood, Cal's entire body still relaxed the second he saw him. Elio glanced between them before slowly releasing Cal. I'm going to Teresa, he announced with suspicious innocence before disappearing upstairs immediately. Marco quietly vanished too, leaving Cal and Alexis alone. You came back, Alexis finally said, his voice rougher than usual. Cal nodded slowly. Yeah. Alexis stayed where he was, like he no longer trusted himself to come closer first. If you still want to leave after tonight, I won't stop you. The statement hurt far more than possessiveness ever could. Cal crossed the hallway before he could overthink it, and wrapped both arms around Alexis tightly. For one stunned second the alpha did not move at all. Then Alexis pulled him closer so fast it almost hurt. The sound that left him was not relief. It was desperation. I thought I ruined this, Alexis whispered against his hair. I thought once you saw what I'm capable of, you'd never look at me the same way again. Cal closed his eyes tightly. I needed time because I finally understood how dangerous your world really is. He pulled back just enough to look at him properly. But I also realized something else. Alexis stayed silent. I missed you every second I was gone. Something fragile softened in the alpha's expression. Cal touched his face carefully. You're terrifying when someone hurts the people you love. A faint smile appeared despite everything. But somehow you still never made me feel unsafe. Alexis leaned into the touch immediately. You are the safest thing I've ever had, he admitted quietly. The weeks after Cal returned felt different from before, softer somehow, because nothing remained unspoken anymore. Cal officially moved into the townhouse permanently. Elio proudly started introducing him as Omega Papa to everyone in the house. Alexis stopped hiding affection in front of staff or security, reaching for Cal naturally during meals, quiet conversations, or late nights in the studio while Cal painted. And for the first time in years, the Russo townhouse truly felt alive. A month later, Alexis told Cal to dress nicely without explaining why. That should have been suspicious enough. Instead, Cal allowed Marco to drive him into Manhattan, where an entire art gallery waited filled with his paintings. Cal stopped breathing the moment he walked inside. Every canvas from the studio had been professionally framed and displayed beneath warm lighting. Scenes of the garden. Elio laughing. Rain against townhouse windows. Half-hidden portraits of Alexis painted from memory. People filled the gallery. Real critics. Real collectors. Real admiration. You did this? Cal asked shakily. Alexis stepped beside him quietly. You deserve to be seen. Cal looked at him in disbelief. Alexis. You brought life back into my home, the alpha said softly. Let me give something back to you. Later that night after the gallery closed, Alexis brought Cal back to the studio where Elio waited beside the couch holding a small velvet box with both hands. Cal immediately looked at Alexis. The alpha took a slow breath before kneeling in front of him. You gave my son his voice back, Alexis said quietly. And somehow you gave me mine too. His dark eyes held nothing except honesty now. I spent years believing my world destroyed everything good around me, but then you walked into Central Park and changed everything. He opened the ring box slowly. Will you let me love you for the rest of my life? Cal's vision blurred instantly. Yes. Elio cheered loudly while Alexis laughed for the first time in days before pulling Cal into a deep, emotional kiss. Later, beneath the warm lights of the studio while Elio slept curled on the couch nearby, Alexis touched Cal's neck gently and asked one final quiet question. Can I mark you? This time, Cal smiled softly. Yes, Alpha. And as Alexis marked him with unbearable tenderness instead of dominance, Cal realized the lost thing he had been searching for his entire life had never been safety or stability. It had been home. And somehow, after stopping to help one lost child in Central Park, he had finally found it. And that's how one lost alpha child changed 3 lonely lives forever. From a crowded park in New York to a warm home filled with love, Cal, Alexis, and Elio finally found the family they were missing. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel for more emotional ABO love stories.